From a defabricated garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, an exhaustive review of the latest model of water bottle sling bag. And now, the podcast host who has no need for sling bags because he's so manly, Pete Dominic!
That's right, Pete. I am the quintessential man, and I go nowhere without my sling bag, whatever that is. Hello, folks, and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up. Very excited to have you joining me. I have an awesome conversation with the great Noel Casler. Always gold, solid gold as a guest here on Stand Up. I am sure you are going to love it. And now is the time when I ask you to pay me for the show. I do it 5 days a week, and we have a lot more people listening than our subscribers, so it'd be awesome if some of you could subscribe to the show. It is just me, but it is very, very sourced by you, the audience. So many listeners helping out so much, especially lately. We've started this new video initiative. You may have seen videos popping up. I've got a YouTube channel, youtube.com/standupwithpete, but posting them on Facebook and Twitter, Instagram. Even posted a video up on TikTok of Mara and I, Pete.Dominic on TikTok. I don't have many videos up there, but I would like to use all those social media platforms to spread the word. Thank you so much to Dr. Barry Hummel, Maddie Carlson, and Tina Winsett, who have been helping me develop this. We need more listeners who are willing to watch and pull videos, so you get the privilege to watch the interview basically as soon as I do it, and then you can help pull video clips, or just tell the street team, the Stand Up with Pete Dominic street team, what parts of the interview you liked, and we'll get those clips up on social media. So, you want to be a part of our growing community? Sign up now, standupwithpete.com, and if you want to join the street team, go to standupwithpete@gmail.com and let us know. All right, before I get to my great conversation with Noel Casler, I want to address a little something that happened yesterday by a little somebody known as Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, who everybody loves to hate. Yesterday, he introduced a bill that would ban abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy nationwide, and it blew up the internet because he and many other Republicans said this should be an issue decided by the states. That's what the Supreme Court did when it overturned Roe v. Wade in the Dobbs decision. It meant that states now get to decide on abortion. States themselves get to decide on women's reproductive rights. It's absolutely insane, but this is America. And we know exactly what the, I'm calling, Christian nationalist states are going to do because they've already done it in most of them. Why would Lindsey Graham introduce this just 50 days before the midterms? It certainly doesn't help Republicans. Well, I got a few clips for you. First of all, this is Lindsey Graham on CNN this past summer saying he definitely thinks that it should be decided by the states.
Saying that the 2015 Supreme Court decision that made same-sex marriage the law of the land nationally should be overturned?
No, I am saying that I don't think it's going to be overturned.
Nor should it be?
Well, that'd be up to the court. The reasoning, I think, could be attacked, but the point I'm trying to make is I've been consistent. I think states should decide the issue of marriage and states should decide the issue of abortion. I have respect for South Carolina. South Carolina voters here, I trust to define marriage and to deal with the issue of abortion, not 9 people on the court. That's my view.
And my other view is that grits should never have sugar in them. You know how I'm talking to you right now, Vicky. All right, well, that was surprising that he went after our own Vicky Body Robinson. I wonder how he knows that she puts sugar in her grits. Anyway, all of a sudden now, Lindsey Graham wants this to be a national ban. He changed his tune yesterday with just 56 days until the midterm elections. Now at 55, you're listening to this on Wednesday, September 14th, if you are. And here is what he said yesterday.
Here's what I think. I think we should have a law at the federal level that would say after 15 weeks, no abortion on demand, except in cases of rape, incest, to save the life of the mother. And that should be where America's at.
What? Lindsey Graham changing his tune with just 56 days left. And here is just some of the outrage and reaction Republican Senator Shelley Moore Capito, a female Republican senator, said, I don't think there's an appetite for a national platform here. My state today is working on this. I'm not sure what he's thinking here, but I don't think there will be a rallying around that concept. I don't think there's much of an appetite to go in that direction. And then she took a sip from a coal-based smoothie. That's how much she loves her state of West Virginia. In Georgia, Republican nominee for U.S. Senate Herschel Walker said he would support the bill. He said, quote, I believe the issue should be decided at the state level. And then he started yelling fumble, which was really confusing to a lot of people. Hard to watch. So Republicans are mixed on it, but mostly running from it. Senator John Cornyn, Republican of Texas, said that wasn't a conference decision. It was an individual senator's decision. And back here on Earth One with Thinking People, feminist writer Jill Filipovich writes, Lindsey Graham today introducing a national bill on abortion after 15 weeks, which would override the ability of liberal states to decide if abortion is legal and on what terms, and then talks about where he was 4 months ago, as I just pointed to. Justin Baragona on Twitter writes, like nearly everything Lindsey Graham does, you don't have to do too much digging to find him expressing a contradictory, quote, consistent view. Oliver Willis, stop going into the weeds about Lindsey Graham's national abortion ban. It's a national abortion ban from the Republican Party. That's it. A national abortion ban. That's what matters. An abortion ban from the federal government, and Republicans are trying to enact it. Period. Antonio Arellano says the Party of Freedom and Small Government is now planning a national abortion ban. John Cooper on Twitter, the Republican ban is introducing a national abortion ban. It was never about states' rights. Democratic Senator Patty Murray, today Senate Republicans are introducing a national abortion ban. Quote, let the states decide was always a lie. They want to ban abortion in every state and every community. I'll fight this at every turn. Here's former Senator Claire McCaskill reacting to it on MSNBC yesterday.
Lindsey. I think what Lindsey thought he was doing was somehow shifting the debate over trying to make Democrats look extreme. But here's what's in this bill, Joy. First of all, he doesn't have anywhere near 45 co-sponsors for this bill.
Sorry, yes, that was the old bill, so that's my bad. Sorry about that. His old bill.
Republicans in the caucus are very upset with him. They want this topic to go away. They do not want it to be elevated. So what does he do? He not only introduces a bill, he puts in the bill that everything these states have done, like my state, making doctors have to choose between prison and the health of their patient, making children who have been victimized by an uncle or somebody's boyfriend and been raped, that they are forced to carry that child to term. All of that gets to stay. This bill lets all the really extreme stuff stay in place. It just forces more liberal states that still respect women's rights to do this federal standard. And he thought he could kind of confuse all this and make it all about late-term abortions. No, women are smarter than that. And I would just say, and I think it's really important for us to say this over and over again, we can talk about this being an important issue, but the only way we make it an important issue is if all of us find 5 people tomorrow that aren't registered to vote and get them registered.
All right, there you go. Former Senator Claire McCaskill on MSNBC with the call to action. What, if anything, are you doing in your state or district to help get people registered and get good people elected to office? standupwithpete@gmail.com if you want to talk to me about it. All right, let's stay with the Democratic Senator reaction. Here is another current serving senator. Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota was on with Chris Hayes last night.
I want to make clear for your viewers here, it is actually abortion ban immediately in many of the states because it is a 15-week ban in states that haven't put anything in place except to follow the Roe v. Wade precedent. In the other states, 12 of them don't even have exceptions for rape or incest. That would remain, Chris. So basically, he's allowing the states that have already banned abortion right away to have that stay in place. And then all the other states, like Minnesota, which is an island along with Illinois in the Midwest, they would have to follow his federal ban, which is at 15 weeks. And I mean, it is much worse than it sounds just when you say 15 weeks.
And here's a little more from Senator Klobuchar about what Republicans are doing and why now.
Well, a lot of people want to distance themselves from it, that's for sure. But I think it's really important to know that difference, even for those candidates out there that say, oh, I wouldn't support what Lindsey Graham is saying on the Republican side. The question of them is, would they put Roe v. Wade into law? Would they correct the Supreme Court reversal of 50 years of precedent to simply say women should be able to have the freedom to make their own decision about their health care and not have Ted Cruz in the waiting room and not have politicians make the decision? That's what the candidates have to answer, because no matter what they think of Senator Graham's proposal, none of them, as far as I know, on the Republican side and running for Senate here, they are all extreme when it comes to abortion, and they've been very clear in order to get the endorsement of their party that they actually would not allow for the Roe v. Wade protections for women's health.
All right, there you go, Senator Amy Klobuchar. Claire McCaskill. Now here is the White House. At the White House yesterday, President Biden's spokeswoman, Karine Jean-Pierre, answering a reporter's question about it.
Is the White House open to speaking with Senator Graham about some kind of compromise?
So two things I want to say there. The first thing is the senator's proposal would keep in place the most extreme state-level abortion bans that ban all abortions and have no exceptions for health, rape, or incest. That's just what his bill would do. And it also provides no exceptions for women who may need access to abortion for their health. That's what his bill does. It is an extreme piece of legislation, and it is in line from what we are seeing from Republicans on these extreme agendas. That is not in line with the majority of Americans. One last thing, and then I'll move on. I'm going to quote Lindsey Graham from August 7th, 2022, and he said, "I've been consistent. I think states should decide the issue of marriage, and states should decide the issue of abortion." And so, there, that's from his own mouth. And now he wants to do a national ban.
Well, you can be sure that Democrats are going to hit Lindsey Graham and every other Republican running up and down the ticket with the national abortion ban slam, and they should. Republicans are running from it, even the, quote, pro-life ones. Here is Senator Rand Paul on Newsmax with Sean Spicer and some woman whose name I didn't even bother to look up.
So is the timing of this bill right?
I'm 100% pro-life and always support the pro-life position. That being said, I think it's more likely than not, and probably the better part of valor, to see how the states sort this out. We've been fighting for 40 years to overturn Roe versus Wade. Now that it's been overturned, the issue's going back to the states, and you'll have different decisions made in different states. I think the best thing would be to sort this out at the state level and see what happens. I don't think there's going to be a vote federally. I don't think the Democrats are interested in this vote necessarily, so I don't think they'll bring it forward. So in many ways, it's probably a moot point.
I totally agree with your analysis on this, right? So you're right. And Mitch McConnell's come out and said that leadership believes it's a state's issue, just like you're saying. I agree with your analysis that Democrats are obviously not going to allow a vote on this. But the question is that are Republicans making mistakes when they do things like this? Because it just gives Democrats an opening 56 days before midterms to say, see, this is what Republicans' plans are if they get back the Senate.
I think the issue of life is an important one, and one we will continue to talk about. At the federal level, there are some federal aspects to it. Federal funding of it is an aspect, whether or not we should give $300 million to Planned Parenthood each year, whether or not Planned Parenthood is a small business. I'm the ranking Republican on the Small Business Committee, so I have fought against giving free money to Planned Parenthood through the, pandemic relief programs. Those are federal issues. The Roe issue, I think, is going to be decided state by state, and I think we'll see how that turns out. I don't think any federal legislation that either codifies abortion or outlaws abortion is going to pass at this point. It takes 60 votes, and I don't think there are 60 votes.
All right, sorry for that triggering voice, but had to be done. Rand Paul saying it'll never come up for a vote. And here is the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, and man who has no idea which way is up and probably won't be happy at the time of his death, Senator Mitch McConnell, running away from the national abortion ban idea. with just about 8 weeks left until the midterm elections.
Well, with regard to his bill, you'll have to ask him about it. In terms of scheduling, I think most of the members of my conference prefer that this be dealt with at the state level.
Well, good luck with that, Mitch McConnell and Republicans. I hope every single Democrat, progressive, anybody living on Earth 1 hits the Republicans over the head with that for the next 8 weeks. All right, well, I'll get to my interview with Noel right after this, because in case you hadn't heard, yesterday, Ken Starr, who led the Whitewater investigation into former President Bill Clinton, died at 76 years old. And the reaction, of course, on social media, hard and fast. I don't know where you are on speaking about people who just died, whether you're with Mara Quint or with former producer of the show, Alfred Schultz, who says we shouldn't do that. But here was some of the reaction, and I'll give you Monica Lewinsky's at the end here yesterday on Twitter. Sam Thielman writes, Ken Starr is dead. I'll never forget how he had a woman wear a wire so you could humiliate her friend on national television for giving a blowjob, then got fired from his job as university president when it turned out he'd covered up for the football team's years-long rape spree. Rest in peace. I think that was probably the harshest reaction that I saw on Twitter. Mike Sachs added, let's not forget that Brett Kavanaugh worked with Ken Starr to take down a man because he received a blowjob. Millions of dollars and years of work for what? Fuck them both. Pam Keith wrote, Ken Starr is gone. He'll have to answer for what he did. Will he? Roy Wood tweeted, when that Ken Starr investigation was popping, I feel like every DJ in every city dropped a mixtape called The Starr Report, and all of them were banger. I didn't even know that. Jeff Charlotte writes, Ken Starr was a villain, not because he went after Clinton, a ripe target, even if not for the reasons Starr cared about, but because at every turn he supported the use of law and institutions to punish women for having bodies. He bought his hate by desecrating his Christ. Wow, that is probably the smartest take I saw, but perhaps the most important reaction, certainly I think it's fair to say the most anticipated, would be if and how Monica Lewinsky would react. And she wrote on Twitter, as I'm sure many can understand, my thoughts about Ken Starr bring up complicated feelings. But of more importance is that I imagine it's a painful loss for those who love him. Well, there you go. Oh, by the way, he represented Donald Trump in his impeachment as well. So, all right. And finally, before I get to my conversation with Noel Casler, I just have to play this from the MyPillow Christian nationalist, election denier, conspiracy theorist, and grifter in chief. It is Mike Lindell with a very important message.
Today, the FBI, you're going to hear this, and you're probably already hearing it in the news. The FBI came after me and took my phone. They surrounded me at a Hardee's and took my phone that I run all my business, everything with. They could have just, what they've done is weaponize the FBI. It's disgusting. I don't have a computer. Everything I do up that phone, everything was on there, and they told me not to tell anybody. Here's an order, don't tell anybody. Okay, I won't. Well, I am.
Oh, my God. They also took Boris Epstein's phone and a whole bunch more. So I just thought that was awesome. I don't have a computer. How is he making this video? What is he going to do? What is he going to do without all of his numbers, all of his contacts? Mike Lindell. Okay, well, that's all I've got for you in the clips portion of the show. Now it's time to get to my very special guest joining me today. This guy is like a real-life Forrest Gump. He knows everyone. He's done everything. He's had an amazing, amazing life, and he demonstrates that in today's conversation, as he kind of always does. He's a stand-up comic, actor, musician, writer, podcaster, a massive presence on Twitter where he's prolific. He's appeared in People Magazine, Newsweek, on SiriusXM, and at clubs across the country. His comedy draws on his 25 years of experience working behind the scenes in live television and the music industry, including working directly with the Trump family for 6 seasons on Celebrity Apprentice, as well as such icons as Bruce Springsteen, the Rolling Stones, and so many more. His website is noelcasler.com. He's on Twitter at Noel Casler, at Casler Noel. And his podcast is the Noel Casler Podcast. I love talking to him. Today was no exception. One of the best, if I do say so myself. Let's do it right now with Noel Casler. There he is. Noel Casler is joining me now, looking as beautiful as always. Here's the thing that upsets me about you. Just going through your Twitter, I'm a big fan. I love everything that you do. But I don't know what it is with your following. Like, you could tweet, I just took a shit. and it would have with a typo, and it would get more retweets than my best stuff. What is going on? Who are these people that are sharing? You tweet, this one that really irked me. You tweeted a goodbye summer, like you were leaving, Nantucket or whatever. Just a beautiful picture. Goodbye summer. 1 billion retweets. And I'm like, why? Why would you even retweet anybody's goodbye? I was so angry and obviously jealous. What's your secret?
I hear you. Just complete disdain for my audience. I block people left and right. I blocked 1,000 people. I blocked somebody right before I came on that said, I love your tweets, Noel, but they corrected me. They pluralized a word. And it's just like, I'm myself. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, luckily my podcast is free. Like, I don't, I'm just doing this to vent. And it's like in dating. The meaner you are to somebody, the more they come back.
Well, I don't think that's it at all, but it's a nice try. Your tweets are so good. I have a whole bunch of them here that I want to share, including this one. This is really disturbing tweet, but I'm going to read it. Trigger alert to men specifically. There's a tiny fish in the Amazon called a candiru that will swim up your urethra and deploy sharp fins once inside, sometimes known as the penis fish. The only way to get rid of it is to cut off the ailing member also, Trump stole nuclear docks.
That's how my brain works, brother. It's a curse.
That's one of the main things I certainly wanted to talk with you about, especially after seeing that picture of Trump and his consiglieres and mob bosses talking at a golf course where the speculation was they weren't really golfing. One person said he doesn't even have a golf bag. You know a little bit about this. What do you think was happening?
Yeah, I think it was a walk talk. I was alerted to that from a buddy of mine who works at a major news network, and he can't talk about that, but he covered the mob in the 80s and 90s, and specifically John Gotti. And he told me this story, how Gotti would walk outside of the Ravenite Social Club with Sammy the Bull, because they knew, the FBI had obviously bugged inside the club. They had bugs in the parking meters, listening devices. So it's like, the thing that struck me about that photo, and it may be that he's just trying to sell the golf course, because I think he's probably nervous about Letitia James, AG James's lawsuits, but Trump knows that course is where he's not going to be heard. Because if you remember, during his administration, he would go to that course in Northern Virginia all the time and make cell phone calls from his golf cart. So my feeling was that was his safe room. That course was a place that it was in the habit of saying things that he didn't want others to hear. And I think there's no way to extrapolate anything other than it was sort of a mob boss meeting. It's very sketchy that he hops on a plane and goes down there Sunday night and stuff and does that.
Did anybody identify all the people that were with him?
I think they've begun to. I haven't, doubled back on it. I don't think it was the initial list. People were saying it was Devin Nunes and all these people. It very well could be just he's trying to sell the golf course. It's a business meeting. But even that is how Trump did business. He did business like a mobster because he was in business with the mob in New York. Everybody knows he was working with Fat Tony Salerno to get concrete and all this stuff. That's what he was. That's what he was when I worked on The Apprentice, The Celebrity Apprentice. Half of the after party was Russian mobsters, and Felix Sater making introductions to Jared and Ivanka of these dudes that look like they would kill you, without a second thought. And the funny thing is they always had their girlfriends wearing mink coats, and we shot it in like early June and end of May. You know what I mean? In New York City, and they're showing up in their mink stoles and stuff. I mean, it was like Goodfellas. It's like Goodfellas, but like dumber with less charm,
I feel like every time I see a picture of him or his dumb sons with a bunch of other guys, and sometimes girlfriends or wives, it always, I know this is wrong to say, but it's the truth. I get a feeling that it's like a non-recovered domestic abusers gathering. Like every guy there looks like he's just a guy who physically and verbally abuses people, including their spouses.
He is an abuser. He's an addict, and he's a dysfunctional sort of like bad seed. He was that way as a kid. He would rage out on this Celebrity Apprentice set all the time. He would curse people out and freak out. He's a nasty individual who's never met any guardrails in his life, right? Nobody's ever.
He admires and attracts people similar to that. I mean, how many, I'm not joking, we found out a lot of guys that worked in the White House were guilty of domestic abuse. Like, we found that out during the administration. I mean, that used to be a huge deal if you found that out about a politician, much less anybody working anywhere. That's still a huge deal in most places but Trump's White House. But
that's very well said, Pete. He attracts those kind of guys, and that sort of toxically masculine, dominant male kind of BS that weaker men, are attracted to and purvey themselves. That's Trump 101. It's part of the whole grift and the gig.
Yeah, you wrote this on Twitter. Trump didn't get to this level of criminality on his own. There were legions of off-duty NYPD enjoying the extra pay in his rapey New York City mob money laundering days, and later fully corrupt Secret Service agents carrying his bags and providing muscle and cover. What are you talking about?
Well, I'm talking about Keith Schiller in the New York City days, right? Keith was his enforcer. He was the guy who would stand outside of the room. When Trump was clubbing, he would hire off-duty NYPD cops to go with him to Bungalow 8 and stuff. I remember in the 90s, a cop telling me he was on Trump's detail. He was like, he called him the biggest poon hound in New York City. He was like, that guy's out every night, getting high and hitting on women. Like, it was no secret, but Trump could hire that kind of like authoritarian cop. Keith Schiller applied to work for Trump. Most people don't know this. Keith Schiller was a rammer, which he's the guy who showed up with the steel, pole, like the big steel bat that they bust down the door in. That was Keith's job. He was on the narcotics squad in the Bronx, and he was the guy who would go on drug bust, and they would get a place where there was a bunch of kilos, right? He was the guy that muscled that went through the door. He walked up to Trump during those years. He happened to see Trump in court downtown in Lower Manhattan. He walked up to Donald and said, "You need to hire me." And gave him his business card. And Trump took him on a temporary basis. And then he became Trump's main enforcer, along with Matthew Calamari, who Trump hired in the 80s when Matthew beat up a heckler at the U.S. Open who was making fun of Trump and Ivana in the stands. Like, they were some guy was just making fun of him and saw him. And Matthew Calamari kicked the
I had no idea. Who is Calamari? Was he a cop too?
He's the head of Trump's security.
No,
he was a thug.
I know.
Yeah, he was just a thug. He was a security guy. He was a USO. I used to work on the US Open.
He was actual security at US Open, and he went and beat the shit out of somebody. Wow.
Right. He took it on his own initiative to kick somebody's ass who was making fun of Trump, and then Trump hired him. Who's that guy? Get me his name. I like the cut of his jib.
By the way, every time I watch those videos, and I watch every one of them because I'm a dirtbag, of people fighting in the stands of any kind of sporting event, I usually watch them in kind of a sick depravity and with certain sense of compassion, yet entertainment. Trump he's the kind of guy who watches them and goes, "Get me that guy. I want to hire that asshole who just punched a lady who poured beer on him."
Exactly. That's literally how Matthew Calamari got the job. And Calamari's still at the Trump organization. He's still the head of security. He lives in Trump Park Avenue along with Michael Cohen. He's a thug. That's who Trump hires. That's why they went into Dr. Bornstein's office and knocked him out of the way and took Trump's medical records. And when Trump became president, he found the Secret Service agents that were like that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Do you know anything about that? I mean, there are Secret Service agents. I know a few Secret Service agents. My cousin married one and at one point, knew him pretty well. And I got to know a little bit about that through, my work and interviewing national security people and stuff. But I'm not surprised that any law enforcement type, much less Secret Service type, would be attracted to a Trump. That doesn't surprise me. But at the same time, I don't want to generalize. I mean, he feels people out, and he's able to find people who he thinks are assholes who will be loyal to him, or that he might have leverage on them so they have to work for him forever or something, right?
Yeah, 100%. He knows how to sniff out the guys that are going to play ball. And, I worked with tons of Secret Service guys in my jobs behind the scenes. I worked on 2 Obama inaugurations. I worked on the 9/11 memorials, all the kind of events that presidents and ex-presidents come through, and Super Bowl, all kinds of things where you have Secret Service doing walkthroughs. They're a wonderful organization. When Trump took over, he changed that organization. And it was apparent to me when I saw a clip of him at Madison Square Garden in 2019, I think it was. And he was at a UFC fight. He came up to New York City for the weekend. He was at a UFC fight. And I saw a picture of Chuck Zito, who was a regular in the Celebrity Apprentice after party days, former head of the New York City chapter of the Hells Angels, giving a backslap bear hug to the president of the United States. And the Secret Service guys were outside of the perimeter. They were letting that happen. When I worked for the Secret Service, for example, on Obama's second inauguration, we had Soundgarden perform. And one of their security guards had like a prior from like 30 years earlier, from like a bar fight. And Secret Service was like, that dude can't be in the building when the president is here, right? But now Trump's president, and Chuck Zito, a guy who went to prison for stabbing somebody and blowing somebody up, gets to backslap him. Now, I'm not indicting all the Secret Service. I went to high school with Bobby Engel. That's the guy who got choked in the back of the SUV by Trump, right? Yeah, he was a year ahead of me in high school. And he's still married to a girl we went to high school with, and she's from a nice family. Like, that guy was like a Marine, a cop type Marine, and Trump is attracted to that sort of thing. I don't think that guy's necessarily corrupted. I think the Tony Ornato guy, who was his boss, was certainly corrupted, and Trump made him an actual like political appointee at the White House. He's the guy who just resigned a few weeks ago. So he knows how to find those guys he can bend to his will. And what I've observed, and, I'll give somebody like Bobby Engel the benefit of the doubt, I think you get in with this guy with the right intentions, and then he sort of degrades you over time. And you realize all of a sudden, he's asking you to drive to the Capitol, to overturn an election, and he's choking you when you tell him no. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I can. Yes, absolutely. That's that. What do we know why Tony Ornato resigned from the Secret Service?
No, he just resigned like 3 weeks ago, and Bobby Engel's down in Tampa now doing like counterfeiting or something, and I'm not supposed to talk about like him or that I know him. I mean, I haven't seen the guy since 1989, but he's from my town, not far from where you are, Northern Westchester cop types. That's who always Trump attracted.
Oh, yeah.
Right. You remember the 80s. It was always
I live with them now. They are my neighbors. They are my daughter's friends' dads. 100%. Yes, you could not be more right. That is not even a generalization. If you found a police officer that lives in Rockland County, much less a firefighter, that was not a Trump supporter, I'll give you $100.
Same thing. I'm from Putnam Valley, which is on the other side of the river. It's the same thing. Northern Westchester, Putnam County, Rockland, Orange County, where Copland was, Long Island. It's those kind of New York area dudes that are good, hardworking dudes, but they sort of bought into the grift and the false patriotism of Trump. Because you remember Trump and all the Republicans always use the immigrants are bad, the blacks are bad, the inner city is full of crime. So that generation that you just described, those are the children of the first people that left the suburbs in the white flight of the 60s, left the cities for the suburbs, rather, right? So they sort of grew up around kitchen tables where you'd hear this kind of resentment against the poor and the Reaganism
I absolutely right. But, there's one thing, sorry to interrupt you, because I think that this is something you probably have some insight on. And I know this is a cheap point of criticizing other people for doing this kind of thing, but I think it's particularly relevant. I guarantee you have some thoughtful insight, which is, when someone says, the type of people who would do this are the same type of people who would do that. And I'm about to do it. I'm talking about the type of people who the other night, I warm up the audience at Last Week Tonight on HBO. And before I go out, I don't want to brag. They won the Emmy and I wasn't thanked. I'm pretty irked. I can't believe they're not talking about the fluffer who's been doing the job for 6 months. Anyway, I say to one of the crew members, this is the September 10th we taped. So the next day, September 11th, I say, does anybody have any good 9/11 material? And dude who loves me gets upset, opens his wallet and shows me his badge. He's like, there's no funny 9/11 material. I'm like, yeah, there is. It's comedy. There's something funny if you write it the right way about everything from racism, the Holocaust, cancer, rape. You have to do it in a certain way. And I obviously wasn't planning on doing that as a fucking warm-up, or much less the day before or at all. But the point is, what I'm saying is that guy who for some reason works as a crew member and has a badge, I don't know what that's all about. But these guys are all Trump supporters. All the NYPD people are Trump supporters. But the question I want to ask you is, Donald Trump was so disrespectful and so dishonest about his role and everything around 9/11, and they could not care less. I realized what's at play here, but I still wanted to get your take. You can't say anything about 9/11 because it's sacred. That would be most people, and that's a fair point, by the way. But this motherfucker was so horrific and used it and lied about it and was so dishonest, and yet they're okay with him, even if you point it out, Noel.
Dude, well, first of all, kudos on the warming up the audience. I love John Oliver, and I didn't know you did that. That's amazing. I saw your tweet. I didn't know you were actually the guy. So now I'm starstruck and impressed. That's awesome. But yeah, it's that same mentality. Nobody got screwed over like more by Giuliani and Trump and Bernie Kerik than cops and firefighters, right? Bernie Kerik was having affairs in an apartment that they gave for first responders to take a rest in above the pit, right? Bernie Kerik was having affairs and embezzling money. Giuliani, we all know what he did with the radios and the communication devices and putting the command center downtown when they told him not to. He was a grifter. He was a scammer. Trump has had about 1,000 lies about 9/11, including he was down there pulling rubble off of people. He applied for funds saying his building was damaged. And here's the thing that drives me nuts that nobody tracked down. I have it on pretty good authority that Trump was at Mar-a-Lago on 9/11. Okay. And Crane's Business did a story about it in 2016. There was another story earlier, but he was apparently down there for the weekend with another couple. And the other guy who was with them has since passed away, but he told that story in the press. Like, Trump wasn't even in New York City, right? And flights were grounded for 2 days. He probably flew back 2 days after 9/11. His first photo op down there was like September 18th, right? So the dude wasn't even in town. He's repeated 1,000 lies, right? Including he saw people falling out of the windows from Trump Tower. It's impossible. I lived on, Waverly and Green. You couldn't see.
You lied. Do you remember that comedian Steve Renazizi lied about being in the building on 9/11? It destroyed his career, at least temporarily. If you lie, like that stolen valor type lie about seeing a thing or being at a place like this, it destroys most people's reputation. If memory serves, one of his first reaction was, no, my building is the tallest. Like, one of his, if I'm right, which is, was never like, what a bizarre and horrific and obviously illustrative thing for him to say. But these types of law enforcement people who find it sacred, that day and what happened, they should. But anybody who says these kind of things should not be respected, but they revere him still.
Exactly. Because of the iconography of sort of racism and I'm on your side. I'm a good guy. And it's all BS. And the 9/11 stuff, as a New Yorker who lived downtown on that day, like, I wasn't downtown that day. Thank God. I quit a gig with Michael Jackson and went up to my house in Woodstock because he was such a freak. I couldn't deal with it. That's how I got out of 9/11. Another story for another time. Yeah. That's what kept me from being downtown. But the fact that he would lie about that, the fact that he would take funds, and he also, he talked about Muslims celebrating in Jersey City, which was a complete fabrication, which endangered the lives of fellow New Yorkers who were Muslim Americans, who were just as American as Donald Trump and anybody else who suffered on that day. I was
thinking of that, but I wasn't going to point to that one because law enforcement types love that story. They love to believe that was true because, of course, they were Muslims who the NYPD, of course, were spying on. Right. And CNN just hired the guy who was in charge of that operation, by the way.
John Miller, who began, if you remember, he was at NBC in the 80s. He was a newscaster before he went to work at City Hall. He was somebody who came into that whole, like, broken windows, Bill Bratton, like Giuliani, kind of like, we're just going to crack down on everybody. John Miller was an architect of that stop and frisk kind of mentality that took over New York for so long. It's disgusting. I'll shut up now, but one of my best friends growing up, we were roommates in Vail, Colorado. We moved out there from New York as ski bums when we were 18. He became NYPD. He was a cop who served with valor. He ended up working on the pit for a year, almost a year. And he got like weird bone cancer and stuff. Like, he's all messed up from his time there, and he'll tell me stories about the sort of mentality and racism that's just rife in that department that's changed. But back then was a very black and white, no pun intended, sort of mentality. You know?
Well, that's also true. The pun. Well, it's just so many other guys like that as well that worked there. You wrote this: if America was a person, other people would stop looking us in the eyes. And I pissed and shit my pants laughing at that because it's so true. But what was there? Do you remember what inspired that tweet? If there's anything?
It was just the shame. It was the other revelation. I believe it was about the documents, the nuclear secrets, that this guy is still walking free. Do you know what I mean? For stealing nuclear secrets, and selling them probably to a foreign power. Like the fact that they found those in his office is like, you think you would get a black hood over your head and you'd be on a helicopter to never be seen again, right? Khalif Browder got accused of stealing a backpack and spent 3 years in solitary confinement in Rikers,
and killed himself.
Right. Because of the trauma.
Apparently.
But this guy who's a lifelong criminal pushes it to the point he's stealing documents and he's still flying around going to his golf courses. It's insane.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to talk to you. Once I heard that news, I went to your Twitter feed to see what you wrote, and I think one of your first tweets was, "There's no way in hell." I read this one on my favorite tweets segment that I do, Noel. Congratulations. I did it twice. Anyway, you write, "There's no way in hell that Trump had a document describing another nation's defenses and nuclear capabilities without Jared and Vanke seeing it too and leveraging the info. Just saying, wait until their business partners found out how much Trumps were double dipping." You also tweeted about the nuclear documents. Guys, I'm starting to think this guy whose campaign had over 100 contacts with Russian agents fired the FBI director, got impeached twice, and tried to burn down the U.S. Capitol to overturn an election. He lost, may not be a straight shooter. And finally, there were more, but one more. Trump's espionage case just went from Victoria's Secret to nuclear secret, which I also liked.
Thank you.
More thoughts on not only, he gets away with things that nobody ever could, but just, why he thought he could do this based on what you know of the man, and why we should believe or not that there aren't folders and files at every other property he has, including, as whoever made this joke first wins, in his ex-wife Ivana's casket.
Because there probably is, he has no shame and he has no guardrails. He hasn't been stopped. I'll give sort of an ancillary anecdote that I think, I don't even know what those words mean. I'm just trying to sound smart.
That was perfect.
Here's a story. This is who Trump is. When he was elected president, right? When he was elected president, they had to make contingencies for having the nuclear football around him, right? There's a military wing of the White House. It's like the office of the military in the White House, where these guys who carry the nuclear football, right? The briefcase with the codes that's handcuffed to their wrist, and they always have to be within reach of the president. So when they found out Trump was going to be president, they had to make arrangements at Trump Tower in case he stayed there to have an apartment close to Trump to keep this, device right near him in case he was needed in the middle of the night to launch codes or something. So when Trump found out about that, right, the DOD is who pays the bill. They wanted to rent an apartment in Trump Tower. Going rate was like $50,000, $60,000 a month for a 30. I know it's ridiculous, right? But that's market rate, right? So for a 3,500 foot apartment, $60,000. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Trump charged them $130,000 a month, and they signed an 18-month lease. That's $2.5 million that Trump grifted out of DOD to protect the nuclear football. Now think about that. You've been elected president and you're going to be entrusted with basically the fate of the free world, right? What could be more sort of a sacrosanct thing than these codes that could wipe out all of humanity and every living, you know what I mean? To most people, that would be such a weighty responsibility. And if you happen to own a bunch of real estate, you'd be like, hey, I'll give it to you at cost. I got to cover the maintenance and keep the lights on, but, take it. Whatever you want to pay me what you can. Trump saw it as an opportunity to grift, right? You think about the morality in that. That all he saw in that moment when he was getting ready to take office was, how can I scam more money out of the taxpayers? And he did it the whole time he was in office. He did it with the Secret Service and jacking up room rates at Mar-a-Lago and every other resort and going golfing every weekend. It's always a grift with the Trumps, not just Trump, but his kids too. It's always, what can we steal? And there's nothing too petty for them. Eric Trump used to take all the Twizzlers off the craft service table at the end of the night.
Yeah.
Literally.
It's so crazy. Yeah,
it's true. That's not even a joke.
I've heard you say it before, and it's my favorite thing.
Because it shows you who they are. And I remember seeing it. Like, I remember the end of a shooting and seeing Don Jr. and Eric Trump filling up their pockets like they were some PA going back to Queens at the end of a 12-hour day, right? We've all taken a snack from the, craft service table to take back to your hotel room, but you're supposed to be billionaires. Like, your name is on the show. You're getting a legit paycheck from MSNBC, and you're stealing power bars.
Was it you or somebody else that commented? I don't know how this got in my feed. It must have been someone commenting on it. But Don Jr. went on an alligator hunt.
Oh, God.
And he posted photos of him and a whole bunch of other assholes with a bunch of dead alligators.
Yeah.
And somebody wrote something like his dad, Donald Trump, doesn't love those types of photos or something. Do you know anything? That wasn't you.
I saw the photo and it disgusts me. And he was with Kim Gargoyle or Guilfoyle or whatever the hell her name is, right? Like, what kind of human does that? And they were giant alligators, majestic creatures, right? In a world that's dying in a natural sense.
Can you believe that a crocodile killed the Steve Irwin? I mean, maybe he deserved it because he was fucking with animals too much, but and yet no ferocious beast has yet even attacked a Trump. It's hard to believe that.
I agree. It was a stingray, not to correct you. I believe it was a stingray that took out Irwin.
Don't come on my show and tell me you got killed.
Same thing. You know what I mean?
You would. Someone had videos of Steve Irwin's death, apparently due to a stingray. Did you hear that this week? Ooh.
Oh, God, no.
The videos are like someone taped it. It exists, which is...
Oh, God.
Anyway, you also tweeted, starting to feel sorry for these MAGA bros. They thought they were just supporting an openly racist moron because he probably reminded them of their fathers or something. And now they're stuck with his treasonous ass until he goes to prison. Are you feeling sympathy, Noel?
It goes back to that point we were just making about the guys we grew up with. You know, it's like, I'm not ultimately sympathetic, but it is like, you almost feel sorry for him because the amount of lies they have to keep telling themselves that this guy's still the good dude, he still has their best interest at heart. They must be staggering at this point. I mean, a lot of them are dumbasses, but, we grew up with these kind of guys. Some of them are sensitive. Some of them kind of deep down at night must be like, man, we got conned. You know what I mean? The Dems are getting their student loans forgiven. They're getting the gas prices down. They're having all these victories. And we got Lindsey Graham looking like a hungover skunk. You know what I mean? Coming out and trying to ban abortion. They're going to go down with this ship, but it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, you have been really cruel and critical of Lindsey Graham. I think it's really too far. Let me just see here. You've been almost wholly focused on him in the last 24 hours or so. Lindsey Graham, where you tweeted, how does Lindsey Graham get that? I just crawled out of a bottle of gin that had rolled beneath a Motel 6 dumpster in the middle of the night. Look, so consistently. Very mean. You also wrote, Lindsey Graham looks like a Cracker Barrel biscuit dipped in grain alcohol and left in a bus station ashtray for 3 weeks in August, which I think is cruel and unfair. And then finally, a third anti-Lindsey Graham tweet, almost based wholly on his appearance. You tweeted, Noel, he's like a do not disturb sign come to life. Listen, I should have read those in the right sequence, but why so mean to this good man? What has he done to you?
Right. It is unfair. I'm piling on. He's probably just up all night working on a bill. Thank you. I wrote that. I couldn't say it on Twitter because I'd get canceled. I was saving it for you, Pete.
I don't know why. You're just making fun of the fact that he doesn't actually work on legislation.
Yeah, that's it.
I don't know what I missed.
There's nothing to be made fun of, right? There's nothing wrong. It's just like, to me, he embodies what Trump did to the GOP, if we can be serious, right? He was completely against Trump. Trump took him golfing at Mar-a-Lago or Doral one afternoon, and all of a sudden, he's been the leading advocate. He's under subpoena by January 6th and Georgia at this point. He's defying both subpoenas, and now he's telling women, a 65-year-old man with no children who's never been married, what to do with their bodies.
Yeah, he's a garbage person, and I don't like to say that about people, but he's also not hard to psychoanalyze because he's basically admitted it at some points, But, I mean, he cozied up to John McCain for power, and after Trump, destroyed him in the primary, personally went after him, he cozied up to him, and whoever said that Lindsey Graham is like a pilot fish couldn't have been more. I mean, that's all he is just a barnacle.
He's a guy who grew up in his family's tavern, right, in North Carolina or South Carolina, dancing for nickels. That's a true story. That's from the New Yorker profile. He would go into the bar as a little kid and guys would give him a nickel and he'd do a little jig, right? That's all he does. He's dancing for nickels. You know, whoever's throwing him a dime, he's going to do whatever. And he has no interest about the future of this country. To me, the apex moment of his sort of disgusting disingenuousness was the Brett Kavanaugh, you know, when he got all remember when he was just so offended.
How dare you talk to him? How dare you talk to him that way?
Exactly.
Have you no decency? This man doesn't deserve it. He was just losing it on people like Mazie Hirono.
Exactly. No, exactly. I mean, his whole character came out in that moment. And he's a guy who was a Navy lawyer. This isn't like a dumb guy, but like, you know, the toxicity and the, you know, just like vileness of that human being came out. And I'm with you. I don't like to call anybody a trash human, but a dude like that's doing a lot of damage.
Yeah,
you know?
For sure. What about this idea that rich people, powerful people always get away with everything? I don't like that because, yes, it's true. They're far more likely to, because of their resources, have the best lawyers and have the best resources that can help them navigate any kind of criminal process. And clearly, we all know that Trump has been guilty of all kinds of crimes throughout history, but he was able to litigate himself out of most of them. And also was, I think, pretty good when he was a civilian. Well, he's always a civilian, but before he became president, in searching for the right judge.
Yeah.
And then he gets to be president and he gets to pick judges. And so just when you think we got him, he found a judge to get him the special master thing. I still think he's going to get indicted based on the legal analysts that I follow, not on anything I learned in this shed other than that. But what about him always being able to get away with everything and not yet? He hasn't gotten caught yet, but so far it's like this one last chance that he found this judge to appoint a special master, which every legal analyst across the political spectrum says doesn't happen and will set a terrible precedent for all of the criminal justice system. Because now everybody's going to want a special master, apparently, who committed any kind of crime. What about his history of litigation and judge shopping and this one? Do you still think he's cornered? Do you think he's cornered? Not still. I don't know what you thought.
I do think he's cornered. I agree with you. I think he will ultimately get indicted. And I think the story of him, right? He's had 4,000 lawsuits before he became president. Wow. He was involved in 4,000 lawsuits. A guy named James Zirin wrote an excellent book about it. I think I'm getting his name right. And I went to a luncheon with this guy in New York City and he listed all these cases and it's mind boggling. You know, and basically Trump's never been to jail because he knows the guys who build the jails, right? That's a metaphor, but that's what I'm trying to say about him. And the best case to look at that was he had a helicopter pilot in the 80s who was in charge of the company that Trump used to bring high rollers to his casinos in Atlantic City. That guy also happened to be a drug smuggler, and he was flying kilos of cocaine from South Miami up to Ohio. He got busted, right, for doing this in Ohio in the 80s with like 5 pounds of cocaine in his helicopter. But he was an associate of Trump's. Trump didn't turn his back on him. What Trump did, somehow this guy got his case moved from Ohio to North Jersey, where Trump's sister, Marianne Trump, was a federal judge. And she sat on this guy's trial for a couple weeks until it came out that Marianne Trump and her husband had flown on the helicopter with this guy who sat before her now in court for drug smuggling. The guy sat there. Marianne recused herself, assigned another judge. That judge read a letter that Trump had written aloud in court talking about what an upstanding pilot this guy was.
Wow.
Meanwhile, Trump gave this guy a free apartment in Trump Plaza. The guy essentially gets a slap on the wrist, gets a 5-year sentence, does 13 months up in Danbury, gets out, buys a Trump Tower apartment now on Fifth Avenue for all cash and goes back in business, right? And Trump gets confronted on it a couple years later. He says, I don't remember anything about that. And they pull out the letter and say, did you sign that letter? He goes, well, that's my signature, but I don't remember saying it, right? So Trump has always found a way to make the law work for him because Trump's a wealthy white man. How many young African Americans went to jail in the late 80s for infinitesimal amounts of cocaine? Because this guy had pounds.
Yeah. And because they simply didn't know that this or that legal procedure or person could maybe buy them some time. I mean, this is, Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow documents so much about how the criminal justice system is so racist, and that's, a perfect anecdote or example, that kind of thing. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's James Zirin. I've never heard of him, but I'm looking at it. Plaintiff in Chief, a portrait of Donald Trump in 3,500 lawsuits, and he's not counting all the ones probably, because that was since, yeah.
Right. It's a great book. It's right behind me over here. And, it'll blow your mind because there's so many just egregious, instances of him getting away with it, and it's not just Trump. It's because Trump is tied to all these other people. That's what folks need to understand. Trump pays commissions to people. There's white shoe law firms. There's banks. There's investment houses that all have an interest for a guy like Trump not going to jail and not rocking the boat too much. And that's how it works. That's how our justice system works. My mom went to prison when I was a kid, and she deserved to, because she got caught up in drugs and broke the law, and she went to prison. Right. And I remember visiting her in jail, and she was the only white woman in Baltimore County Jail. And we sat there for like a Christmas get together, with your parents, which is a very sad thing. And I remember seeing all these other kids, and I remember knowing I would get out of that situation for no other reason than basically the color of my skin. You know what I mean? And my mom would probably get out of that situation okay. And she did. She got sent to a place they call Camp Cupcake in West Virginia, where Martha Stewart went to, and I got to move up to Westchester with my grandparents. The rest of those kids grew up in Baltimore with a parent who was incarcerated and most likely got caught up in the system themselves. And there was no difference between any of us except for the color of my skin. This was in 1984. That affected who I am. Do you know what I mean? Because I've grown up in that impact.
It's one of my favorite things about you is that you almost always point to the inequities and the racial injustice when making these points about wealthy white folks. I think it's so important that people make that point, and especially the way that you do, because you clearly know what you're talking about. And it's just, that's what people that have experienced that are certainly thinking when we're talking about this shit. So I love it and appreciate it a great deal. What about the fact that there are so many people that are still wrapped up in supporting this guy that he could legitimately still run for president, and it being, in my opinion, Noel, mainly because right-wing media is still, for the most part, supporting and defending him, not to mention Republican congressmen, people running for office. We're about 55 days from the midterms. There's all kinds of numbers of congressmen that could be elected that are election deniers. My question to you, though, is about media. I think that once they turn away from him and stop supporting him for whatever reason, mainly ratings and money, then he starts to lose influence. You're seeing some signs of that every once in a while, and Alex Jones or Laura Ingraham says maybe we should stop, and then their viewers go, "How dare you?" And they're like, "I was just kidding." But what do you see in terms of the media continuing, right-wing Trump MAGA media continuing to support him, and maybe the fever breaking if they start to ever pull away?
Well, I hope it does, because it's that media, infrastructure that feeds Trumpism, right? It's the guys, I won't even mention their name, but these dweebs with their YouTube shows, that are pumping this poison into people, and Alex Jones and all these schmucks.
Yeah,
and then
Don
the big
Bongino is like number one.
It's insane, right? When you look at the numbers, I got how many people listen to my podcast, not that they should, but compared to somebody like that, it's staggering. And especially when you have CNN now, which is obviously tilting to the right or trying to be all inclusive, it's a dangerous thing. I think when the powers that be, as you so well said, change their mind, it'll be over for Trump. What I fear is that they'll pivot to a DeSantis or somebody who's a little more palatable, right? Yeah. A Glenn Youngkin or a Kerry Lake or,
a more effective fascist.
Exactly. A kingmaker, like a Murdoch could pick a DeSantis or somebody with discipline, somebody who's not going to be tweeting and just being a complete moron. And then we're screwed, because if you had that combined with the media infrastructure and the lack of critical thinking on both sides of the political aisle, let's be honest, Democrats are completely uninformed in many cases too. People react to stuff like, I never heard about that. It's like, how did you not hear about that? It was in the newspaper,
Well, yeah, I'm for people reading newspapers still. Sorry.
Me too. Yeah, I posted a thing about Eric Prince. People forget, but Eric Prince had this like spy operation in Wyoming during the last election, trying to get Trump elected and infiltrating Democratic campaigns. And the New York Times broke that story last June of 21, and most people forgot about it. You know, and
why did you re-up that? Was there some?
It just popped into my mind because, I was thinking MI6, which is well-organized intelligence, Eric Prince, who's basically a paramilitary guy. And I just wanted to make the point that, like, it's a miracle we survived Trump. The fact that he's still walking free, that, like, that was plan A, right? We'll infiltrate the Democrats and have spies, right? That didn't work. It went all the way to plan C, which was attack the Capitol, right? And he's still keeping that ball in the air. I just wanted to remind people of how well organized it is and how deep the pockets were. Eric Prince wasn't getting paid by Donald Trump. You can bet on that. There was somebody behind Trump, a dark money, Leonard Leo, who just got $1.6 billion, from the guy who makes the surge protectors in your studio. Like, that's what the guy's company is.
I know.
It's.
Yeah. Who's another guy, was once, you like me, lived a charmed life and been around a certain type of affluence and people. I'm not quite the Forrest Gump that you are, but I've seen it. And I suppose that doesn't matter for what I'm about to tell you, but I remember being out in, was it, what's that body of water? Is it the Long Island Sound, I guess, in Queens? And someone pointed to this giant mansion that I was with and said, you know how that guy made his money? He's the solo cup guy. Or maybe it was Nantucket where you go to. Yeah. He's the solo cup. That's how he made like $1 billion. Those solo cups that we love.
Yeah. That's how it is. It's always some dumb thing. Betsy DeVos was Amway. That's where Eric Prince got there. It's always, I was in Nantucket.
At least solo cups and surge protectors serve a purpose as opposed to Amway.
I know. No, it's crazy. Like, I was sitting on the beach in Nantucket 2 weeks ago, and this private yacht came into the harbor, right? That was bigger than the ferries that come in from Hyannis. I mean, the thing was massive, and a guy got up and started screaming. He goes, that scumbag. And it was a dude who owned like 50 Ford dealerships in Massachusetts or something. And he's like, he sold me a lemon and overcharged me. You'll appreciate this. He overcharged me on maintenance. Every time I went to bring my car in, they would say it needs a transmission thing or whatever. He was just basically ripping people off who bought cars from him forever.
You're on the beach and the yacht comes in and some guy on the beach just starts screaming about the guy whose yacht that is. And
Right, because he knows the yacht. It's an obscenely ugly yacht, too. It looked like a big white penis or something. It was just like, that's the other thing with all this enormous wealth is that it doesn't come with taste, right? So instead of a nice sailboat, or people just get, I need the biggest yacht in the world. It's the Jeff Bezos kind of mentality, But it was just funny because whenever I see those super yachts and stuff, I always tell people, I'm like, you don't get there without hurting somebody. You just don't amass that kind of wealth without screwing somebody over.
And you didn't do it by yourself. I mean, you've got hundreds of thousands of human beings working away all day to, do any kind of number of jobs. No, it's disgusting. You could don't get me started on grotesque wealth or wealth in general. I mean, it's preposterous.
I agree.
All right. Well, listen, I love talking to you, and I think I'm out of the main things I wanted to talk with you about. So why don't we just end with a classic Noel Casler? You do this on your podcast all the time. You have endless stories, and I just wanted to share, what's the kind of thing we hear on your podcast about your career? I just heard you talk for like 20 minutes and get a little emotional about your time with David Crosby. You've worked with every major star people can think of, from Neil Diamond to, you just mentioned Michael Jackson. We've heard you talk about Madonna, David Crosby. You're talking about having breakfast with. Give me one of those classic Noel Casler brushes with fame. I mean, you're also like friend. These people love you probably for the same reasons anybody loves you. Go ahead.
Thanks. You're too kind. Well, somebody was just asking me about Tom Waits, if I ever worked with Tom Waits. Right. And I worked with Tom Waits when he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I was thinking about that gig. And when I went from that gig, I was out in Arizona and we were doing a benefit with Alice Cooper, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Nils Lofgren, and Jackson Brown right after Gabby Giffords was in that horrific shooting. So we went out to Tucson and did a benefit. I mean, weeks after, victims were still in wheelchairs and it was gnarly. I went from that gig back to New York, did the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I was assigned to Tom Waits, but Neil Diamond was on that year too. And I love Neil Diamond, right? And he played till 1:30 in the morning. He was standing on a table in the Waldorf, ballroom, serenading Bruce Springsteen and his wife, right? I did that gig, probably got out of there at 3 a.m, hopped on a plane, went to Austin to meet up with the Foo Fighters who were doing the Woody Awards, right? Went upstairs to talk with Dave, who's an old buddy of mine from DC. He was in a band called Scream that my roommate was the bass player of, a guy named Skeeter. And Dave, I talk about this in my act. Dave left because Skeeter broke up the band. And we were bike couriers. Me and Skeeter were bike messengers on Capitol Hill. And Dave was like, you ruined my life. You broke up the band. We were going to make it. We put out an EP. Dave flew out to Seattle, comes back about a year later. I'm sitting with my buddy Skeeter in a park and our other friend, Suicide Mike, right? And I don't know if, that was his name, right? Suicide Mike, right? I don't know if he's still with us. Guy's name, this is 1991.
Yeah, okay.
But Mike, Suicide Mike goes, hey, Dave's back in town tonight. He's playing the 930 Club with his new band. And I go, what are they called? He goes, Nirvana. The rest is history. And me and Skeeter were still bike couriers for the rest of the year. But anyway, so I went out there to Austin and hung out with Dave and Taylor, who they just did the beautiful tribute to. And I've done a lot of gigs with those. And I think I'll leave your listeners with this. The thing you realize working with those guys, the cool ones, they're just like us. Sure. You know what I mean? They're fans too. A lot of the gigs I did what Dave and Taylor played with Queen the night they got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And you've never seen anybody happier or more psyched than Taylor was when he got to play drums, for Tie Your Mother Down and stuff with the remaining members of Queen. Oh, and I remember Freddie Mercury's mom was there and how tragic it was that he'd already been gone for probably 20 years at that point almost. And you're like, wow, his mom is here. And now Taylor's gone. You know what I mean? Taylor is going to be another inspiration. But if you saw his son playing,
I did.
Right?
I hope everybody did. That was you don't need to know much other than that he died last year. And his he OD'd this year in the spring. And my friend still is tour manager. I'm very close with a lot of people in their organization. Yeah. My point is the flame is what matters. It's not the fame, right? It's the passion. It's Graham Nash used to say, they just want to touch the flame. He always had time for fans because what you're hoping is whatever that little interaction does, it inspires something in somebody that they go home and do whatever their great thing is. And that's what moves us forward. It's not the sales and it's not the stardom. It's the love of the game, so to speak. So well said. Did I hear you and have you? You're a talented musician yourself. Mike, have you played music with any of these legends? Have you ever been on stage?
Oh yeah. Yeah, but not like in front of the audience. Like I remember one of my great regrets, I was just thinking about it. We were sound checking in San Diego with Jackson Browne and I play the bouzouki, which is this crazy Greek instrument, and I'd been playing a lot of bouzouki and, Jackson, like in a sound check was like, go get your bouzouki. It was the last show of the tour. And Ravi Shankar, the great, Indian musician was sitting in the front row and Jackson's like, go get your bouzouki, get out here on stage. And I'm on the side of the stage like, no, no, I'm not going to play in front of Ravi Shankar. So, I would jam with like Graham late at night. We'd play in the back of the tour bus and things like that. I'm not on their level as a musician, but like, I got to soak it up and it's, it's fun.
That reminds me of the time Derek Jeter told me to go get my baseball glove.
Did he really?
Nope. Oh.
Nope. Yeah, that's how I still tense up. It's like I remember another time when I worked for Springsteen in 2000, we're sitting around the dressing room and Nils Lofgren, who's his guitar player and a wonderful musician in his own right, we're all sitting there hanging out after the gig and, after the show, like a Springsteen show. And somebody did the same thing, like, Noel, go get your guitar. Like they wanted me to play a song for Nils and I ran out of the room and just like left the gig. I was just like, no. I get stage fright. Comedy is where it comes in for me. Like in terms of a performer, I'm comfortable talking with the mic. I tense up,
really?
Playing in front of people.
That's interesting. I would think it would be a reverse if I could play music because there seems to be less at stake. Like people don't have to be even paying attention when you're playing music. With comedy, if you lose them, it's over.
That's almost what keeps me in the game. Do you know what I mean? You can almost hide behind an instrument. It's a lot easier. It's not easy to play music, but you have other musicians on stage. Comedy, it's just you and the mic and impending doom. And somehow that keeps me, that's the fire I live off of.
Where is the book? Where is Noel Casler, What a Life? Are you going to write it?
I'm writing it, man. It's on like 8 legal pads now,
really?
and I made them. Yeah. I wrote it out longhand, though, and I'm too lazy to type it into the computer, so I'm sort of at an impasse. I just keep writing more.
$10 an hour just to read it. 5.
That's awesome.
Noel, thank you as always, buddy, for joining me. It's always so great talking to you, and someday we'll meet in person. I bet you we will.
Oh, yeah, we definitely will, buddy. We're neighbors, man. I'll swim across the river sometime.
I will film it.
Right on. I'll make it about halfway.
All right, and we are out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dude.
Thank you, Noel Casler. Go follow him right now on Twitter at CaslerNoel. Go listen to his podcast and let him know that you heard him here on the show. And if you haven't already signed up for a subscription, please do it. Please sign up now because this is my full-time job. I book the show, I edit the show, I promote the show, I, of course, host the show, and I can't do it without your subscription. So sign up now for as little as $5 a month. You can always pay more than that anytime you want. Go to standupwithpete.com right now. All right, that's it. I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Coming up the rest of the week, I've got Paul Reichhoff, Tim Wise, Ophira and Christian, comedian Lenny Marcus, who is co-hosting a new podcast with Leslie Jones, and more. Always want to know who you want to hear on the show, so email me anytime. standupwithpete@gmail.com. My email is open 24 hours for you. And if you're John Carroll, just text me. Take us away, brother. Be the change you want to see in the world, everybody.
To let in some light, you gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.